Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, and for those of us in Brussels or in the south of Europe, had a bit of cool air. Now we will start our first plenary session. In this session, we are going to summarize the discussions that we've just heard from the 5 parallel sessions, that is, discussions relating to the sectors of infrastructures, raw materials, and etc. And we will now discuss the synergies between these sectors and, of course, open the floor to questions from the audience. So I am joined here by Lefteris. Lefteris, are you with us?
Thanks, Martin. So, hello, everyone. We are going to now be discussing the outcomes of the different parallel sessions that some of you have joined in to listen in. And hopefully we will see some synergies or perhaps the differences that apply between the different sessions. So you will see the 3 rapporteurs from the morning sessions present what was discussed. And after that, we can have a discussion on how this all will work out. So without further ado, I would pass the floor to Jennifer Bailey from the National Observatory of Athens to tell us more about the urban sector.
Thank you. During our session, we really focused on looking at the issues such as how EO relates in the urban context. So since population is growing, cities are becoming more energy demanding, and we are expecting much more urbanization in the near future. These trends kind of force us to focus on how can we enhance urban resilience, how can we foster sustainable urbanization, which is where efforts like carbon neutrality, different goals like that play an essential role. And in this regard, the relevant policy agendas and frames tackling issues can be brought together under the context of the new urban agenda. So bringing the urban context to kind of tie all these different issues together, climate change, disaster risk reduction, looking through the urban lens can really drive forward efforts in other areas as well. So Earth observations have a crucial role to play here, strong value proposition in terms of cities. Particularly in our session, we discussed some priority areas where EO can help us, looking at things like greening, observing and monitoring human settlements, urban heat islands, and other aspects like that. And in terms of actually addressing these issues using EO, a huge point that was raised was creating a common language. So maybe even relearning how we speak about EO, for example, from the EO community, trying to figure out what city practitioners actually need, and kind of highlighted that there are 3 C's in this regard. So communication, collaboration, cooperation. These are very important for cities, an imperative to avoid cities from working in silos, as well as avoiding fragmentation. So it's important to bring in the multi-stakeholder perspective. So the whole chain, having the city practitioners, the researchers, the entrepreneurs, the citizens all together to help identify what's happening in different cities around the world, which can help other cities address similar needs they might have. But it's also important to understand kind of how EO fits, how we can raise awareness, and what's important to different cities. We also really focused on training, so learning from one another, instead of proposing an EO solution to a practitioner, having the conversation be between practitioner to practitioner to really understand the true problem that cities need, and then how EO can really address that problem. It's less about the solution, more about fully understanding what the needs are. In terms of challenges that exist, I already mentioned the fragmentation, kind of people working in silos. Use cases can really help us in terms of bridging these gaps. So identifying how EO is already being used in certain cases, addressing well-defined challenges. We can, instead of focusing on forging ahead with the solution, actually listen to the problems, and then focus on a solution that would be sustainable. So not ending when a project ends, but rather having some sort of future plan and being integrated into a city's practices. And in terms of opportunities, we focused on kind of livability as being really important because it brings citizens and people in the cities into the discussion. It also forges a connection with the citizens. A part of that is well-being. Another opportunity is resilience and sustainability, kind of bringing the EO community in as they can observe different parts of the city, identify where the problems might be, and work with the relevant stakeholders to help heal aspects that need to be addressed. And also, we discussed issues around procurement, capacity building, and funding. And in terms of procurements, it's a difficult problem to address as it's different in each city. It can be different in each city, but movement is happening in this area. There is a focus on this. And in terms of funding, it's less of an issue. The funding exists, but it's more about trying to fund the solutions to the real problems. Capacity building and development are important aspects, like I mentioned. So bringing citizens in, citizen science is an easy way to get involved here, and opening the door to what Earth observation has to offer, especially in the city context. And EO is really, at the end of the day, a useful tool because cities are where most changes are happening, and it's also where most opportunities lie. So the challenges can really be identified and illuminated and highlighted by Earth observation. And solutions can come from engaging with the city to identify and address these true problems and integrating all of these different aspects. So technology might be a tool that can help build resilience in a city, but it's really a combination of technology, tools, conversations, talking the same language that can help us find the answer. And it was highlighted that being nimble and flexible is really important as we move forward in this discussion, because cities will have to address a constantly changing, complex set of challenges.
Thanks a lot, Jennifer. Thanks for giving us this overview of what was discussed in Urban. I'll pass the floor now to Steen Smet from Verheert, who will give us a similar taste from the raw material side.
Yeah, Lefteris, thank you for inviting me here for reporting on the focus group that we had on raw materials. What we started from, of course, is what we all pretty much know, is that there's huge global challenges facing us, increasing population, but also an increasing demand for raw materials. Still, more than 70% of all resources are not recycled and come from mining sources. So those challenges are, of course, well known, but when we post the question in one of these polls, the main challenge for our sector seems to be responsible sourcing and responsible production of these raw materials. And they were even prioritized over price volatility or security of supply. Although we have, of course, discussed a lot on the security of supply, as a lot of these raw materials still come from unstable regions. A lot of them come from China, and just a small fraction of it comes from Europe-based countries. So that was on the challenge, which was a bit setting the scene. And then we talked about what are some opportunities for EO. Of course, we had the assistance of our great evangelist, Irene, and she pointed out that there's a lot of application potential in all stages of mining. We can think of applications starting from exploration of large areas to exploitation of these mines, and even to post-mining applications. For example, on how to detect ores in large areas, how to monitor remotely on specific areas. We saw examples of early warning systems for potential collapses, monitoring of spillage of acid mine drainage, and even tracing of illegal mining activity. So that was really insightful to see all these different potential applications fields. And the beauty of it is that they don't only create cost effectiveness for the mining industry in their operations, it also provides safety enhancements for the people who are involved in the mining industry. But it also creates communication and transparency options for the local communities, for NGOs that are involved. So EO truly can leverage a lot of potential in this industry. Then we talked about the topic, of course, which might be the elephant in the room. It's on the negative perception of the mining industry. And for this, we saw that Earth observation data can provide transparency and trustworthy data for local communities. Of course, it will take time to earn the trust of these local communities and the social license to operate, but although we saw that there's quite some potential. According to our poll, I think almost everyone noted down that EO will generate the most value in environmental monitoring use cases, although there's plenty potential still. Then we talked about how to bring this opportunity forward, and then we said that the main challenge for Earth observation in this industry is to create valuable solutions for the end users. So the panelists urge really to consider the development of downstream applications tailored to the needs of the end users, and don't just push technology propositions. We need to really consider, what do NGOs need? What do local communities exactly want to provide, for example, this social license to operate? And then last but not least, that's my closing point, in order to make the best out of it, it was also discussed that we need to consider valorizing the data. Dealing with all the available data is seen as one of the paramount items for success, and a lot of AI applications will enable processing, a lot of monitoring, a lot of detection applications automatically, but of course, we need to consider that all these different data piles should be connected to databases and applications to become valuable. So therefore, finally, the panelists urge us for more networking in this quadruple helix model, where we find synergies between stakeholders to really leverage the opportunities of EO in this domain. And that's it for my focus group.
Thanks very much, Dan. And now I would pass on the floor to Remco Takken from the World Geospatial Industry Council to tell us about infrastructure.
Thank you so much. The session I'm going to summarize is called Advancing the Digitalization of Infrastructure. And it started out with Helen Roth of Vital Infrastructure Arena. She was showing us major challenges and ambitions in safe, smart and sustainable infrastructure. Well, infrastructure here concerns rail, road, air or airports. The most important goal, according to her, is to pave the way for increased innovation capacity, strengthen the market and competitiveness, and facilitate collaboration across borders. And when mentioning the vast investments that will be needed, she implicitly hinted at getting new technologies and new ways of working in. Helen explained that observation will be needed to support large upcoming megastructures across Europe, like Germany, Norway, and she mentioned really vast subsea road tunnels as an illustration. And as for our aging infrastructure, the stuff that's already there, Earth observation also supports mega renovation projects to upgrade those. Infrastructure asset life cycle is complex and it's costly. The infrastructure sector should work through the entire life cycle, though, of all the assets that they build and design across borders and outside their conventional silos, so be it road owners, construction companies, small startups, or fire and rescue services. And connecting should become the new normal to build better infrastructure. And connect Earth observation into this life cycle will actually improve and support to achieve our common support to achieve our common goals. And the common goals are relevant areas within the infrastructure cycle are planning, operation, and maintenance. Well, of course, in that cycle of infrastructure life cycle stuff, we should not be forgetting developing and preservation of the assets. But planning, operation, and maintenance are the obvious stages where Earth observation can help. I'm struggling to get to my next page because I have some textual help here. second speaker was Lucy Kennedy. She's one of our Earth observation evangelists today, and she's also CEO of Spotted. She gave her perspective on EO. Well, she's also seeing a huge amount of investment, especially in Europe. The Green Deal, creating a challenge for the infrastructure industry. Earth observation could enable the sector make more informed choices in terms of planning, because 20 plus years of data gives us a view on the progression of things in the past. It helps us in planning the future, where to locate your novel infrastructure, or how climate change will be impacted. How did it evolve before? Operations, how to lower operational costs. INSAR imagery is able to detect land motion, bridge deformations. How would somebody start digging close to infrastructure? Okay. If you would know and could predict the environmental conditions their assets are experiencing. From maintenance point of view, shift from schedule-based maintenance towards more risk-based maintenance strategies. Those bridges, you could check bridges with a higher risk, but you do them more regularly than the others. This is a place where Earth observation tools can really help. And do we understand how environmental conditions affect the lifetime of those actual assets? Well, at this point we don't, but moving towards risk-based maintenance, we should. Lucy said the mass market does not exist yet. Thus, we must remove the barriers, gain knowledge on analytics, and show cost versus value. So that's basically where she was. And then a panel discussion was started with some more speakers coming in. Also, there were public questions concerning smaller companies. As a small and medium enterprise, a barrier that you need to deal with are big companies and governments with complex rules and regulations. One of the answers coming from our panel is coming from Lucy, and she said, yeah, what more and more big companies, and to some extent governments, are doing is trying to make their purchasing processes more SME friendly. But this was concurred, this was also said, oh, I'm starting to wrap up now. It's by Roy Haskening, DHV, telling that they are actually working together with SMEs in order to help them in specialist solutions. Additional needs and barriers, that we are very product-based, and we start to think in portfolio terms. We should think bigger, think out of the box, and then making an ecosystem thinking is a good way to pursue. We lack training to understand the value of the data in the infrastructure sector. That's what Julia Gozzini of SINA ASTM said. Arnold of Cervic Construction brought in a nice real-life example. NASA's ship detection system is based on AIS. Why don't we think about something similar for our road networks? Why don't we monitor on continuous basis road safety, road performance, etc.? That's where Earth observation comes in. Well, other gaps and challenges in terms of uptake were there. Most of them concerned marketing. Earth observation is not yet considered as a discriminant and unique technology. We should change that. The actual problem, concludes Helen Roth, is the lack of deal flow. So with this, I would like to conclude to stay in time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Remco. These are very interesting topics that you brought up from your discussion. I noted down a few themes that seem to have gone through all three sessions. One was security of supply. Even in urban, we were discussing about supply chain and how things that happen in one part of the world may affect how things are happening in another city. The same, of course, applies to raw materials and to infrastructure. The quadruple helix, it's a nice buzzword, but it's also a very necessary reality. So it's nice that this came through sort of this multi-stakeholder cooperation in all sessions. And of course, everything that goes around the value proposition of Earth observation, understanding it, communicating it, testing it, and then of course helping those that would benefit from it to actually do so. So with this, I would pass the floor back to Martin.
Thank you, Lefteris, and to our rapporteurs, of course, for giving us these summary points. It is very important to find synergies between the fire sectors in order to really leverage all the efforts of these different communities and contribute to a strategic research and innovation agenda or roadmap for Earth observation activities in Europe, which is the ultimate goal of FIRE. So, without further ado, let's now advance to our second cluster of parallel sessions, where we're going to look at the sectors of wind energy, marine, and agriculture. So I invite you to join this parallel session, which will start at 2, so in a few minutes, and enjoy the discussions. Thank you very much.